Hello and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Xizhi. Coming up in this edition, the leader of Hezbollah has vowed retribution for the deadly communication device explosions which killed dozens and caused panic in Lebanon. China and the European Union say they've engaged in a constructive consultation regarding the EU's ongoing anti-subsidy investigation into Chinese electric vehicles. And Malaysian King Sultan Ibrahim is in China for a state visit. We begin in the Middle East. Israel says it has carried out intense bombardments striking Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. This comes hours after the Hezbollah leader vowed retribution for the deadly communication device explosions which killed dozens of people. Hassan Nasrallah says Israel has violated red lines by detonating thousands of pages across Lebanon. Israeli officials declined to comment on the attacks. A preliminary investigation by Lebanon has found that explosives were implanted into the handheld tech devices before they arrived in the country. Panic is spreading among residents in Beirut as they fear more explosions. Zahra Al-Derzi has more from the Lebanese capital.
Actually, people have been worried about launching a war against Lebanon since October 2023, when Hezbollah launched its first attack on October 8. Yesterday, Israel launched dozens of heavy airstrikes on the southern Lebanon. We spoke to people from southern Lebanon. Some said they are staying at their homes. Some say that they will leave in case the situation escalated. Some people expressed that their tension, their fears of a war was decreased after the speech of Secretary General Nasrallah, but others are speaking that no, the danger and the risks are still so high since the Nasrallah kept everything open for the time and for the shape and for also the place for their retaliation. And there are some people who are opponents to Hezbollah who said that they called the Lebanese army to replace Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, in southern Litani, and implementing the 1701 UN resolution. But also there are opponents and politicians in Lebanon where expressed solidarity and support for the wounded, and some expressed support for Hezbollah against the attack, which all Lebanese considers as Lebanese or national catastrophe.
That was Zahra Al-Derzi in Beirut. The United Nations says Israel has continued its settlement activities despite court orders and Security Council resolutions. Thursday's council meeting follows the adoption of a resolution in the General Assembly that demands Israel end without delay its unlawful presence in the occupied Palestinian territory. China says the spillover effects of the continued fighting in Gaza imperil peace and stability of the entire Middle East. Jody Jacobs has more from New York.
The second time this week that the UN Security Council convened to discuss the situation in Gaza. On Thursday, Council members heard out despite a legally binding resolution calling for Israel to immediately and completely cease all settlement activity in the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem. Settlement activity has continued. A United Nations report cites increased settlement activity in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, which it says is against international law. Frustration was once again expressed in the Council against Israel. China insists that if the US had not protected Israel, multiple Security Council resolutions would not have been defied.
The US instead has repeatedly asked for more time and patience for diplomatic efforts. In the meantime, the Gazan civilians are paying for more time and patience with their lives and suffering. How come the time and patience needed by the US are so costly? The spillover effects of the continued Gazan fighting are manifesting themselves at a greater pace. Lebanon and Israel on the verge of all-out conflict, imperiling peace and stability of the entire Middle East.
But the United States insists negotiations remains the only way forward.
The United States will continue to do everything possible to put forward ideas and proposals to achieve a ceasefire and hostage release in Gaza that would help lay the foundation for a better future for Israelis and Palestinians alike.
Algeria, speaking on behalf of the Arab group of countries, says the Council should not become a talk shop. It says decisive action is needed now more than ever.
Everyone under this roof must recognize that the region is on the edge of an abyss or a precipice, as you have stated, Mr. President. If it falls into its darkness, the consequences will be far-reaching, and no one will be immune.
Israel insists that it will continue to fight for itself and will stand firm until it can ensure its own safety.
That was Jody Jacobs at the UN headquarters in New York. Turning to Europe, China and the European Union say they've engaged in a constructive consultation regarding the EU's ongoing anti-subsidy investigation into Chinese EVs. Chinese Commerce Minister Wang Wentao met EU Trade Commissioner Valdis Dombrovskis in Brussels. Both sides expressed their political will to resolve differences through consultations. They agreed to continue pushing forward negotiations on price commitments and spare no effort to reach a mutually acceptable solution through dialogue on consultation. William Denslow has more.
According to European Commission spokesperson for Trade and Agriculture Olaf Gill, the Chinese and EU trade representatives agreed to put maximum effort towards finding a mutually agreeable solution. China's Commerce Minister Wang Wentao is in Brussels, with the clock ticking before European members vote on whether to make tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles a permanent fixture for the next 5 years. That vote was originally scheduled for next week, but has reportedly been delayed. Ahead of his meeting with European Trade Commissioner Valdis Dombrovskis, Wang said his delegation arrived in good faith and will persevere until the final moments of the consultations. Beijing has previously accused the EU of adopting protectionist policies, warning that these tariffs will harm its green transition. These talks coincide with fresh calls from European automakers for the EU to take action in response to waning demand for EVs. Following the trade talks here in the Belgian capital, Olaf Gill says both sides agreed to take a renewed look at price undertakings and keep open channels of communication at the ministerial level.
That was William Denslow on the China-EU talks on Chinese EVs. Still in Europe, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has pledged €10 billion to help Central Europe recover from severe floods. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk welcomed the support amid severe flooding in the country's third-largest city. Meanwhile, Storm Boris has travelled to northern Italy after killing more than 20 people in Central Europe. Thousands have left their homes in Emilia-Romagna, and schools and offices have closed. Giles Gibson reports.
More than 1,000 people have been evacuated. There are videos of firefighters using inflatable boats to go street to street, checking houses because the roads are completely impassable. You've also got the Italian military sending helicopters to help search and rescue teams in their ongoing operations, and just a huge amount of disruption to everyday life. Trains being cancelled right across the region, schools being closed, and also in kind of higher up parts of Emilia-Romagna, landslides just blocking off entire roads. Meeting with the leaders of Poland, Czech Republic, Austria and Slovakia with the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. That meeting actually taking place in a city in southwest Poland that has been impacted by Storm Boris. But if you look at the economic cost, you also can see 0.1 or 0.2 percentage points actually cut off a country's GDP as a result of this kind of a natural disaster. Just finally, here in Italy, we actually have a debate already kicking off after the Italian Minister for Civil Protection talked about how hundreds of millions of euros have been sent from the central government to the region of Emilia-Romagna, and he is now calling for there to be a breakdown about how this money was spent. Was it spent in the right places in terms of flood protection?
That was Giles Gibson on the support for flood victims in Central Europe. In Asia, Malaysian King Sultan Ibrahim is in China for a state visit until the end of the week. Chinese President Xi Jinping held talks with the king on Friday. The king is making the visit as the two countries mark 50 years of diplomatic ties this year. Chen Ziyuan reviews China-Malaysia ties.
Malaysia's King Sultan Ibrahim touched down in Beijing on Thursday afternoon and began his 4-day stay visit of China. According to the Chinese Foreign Ministry, this is his first trip to a non-ASEAN country since assuming office as the head of state. President Xi had reached an important consensus with Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim on building a China-Malaysia community with a shared future. Foreign Ministry spokesman Ning Jian said China is willing to work with Malaysia to take this visit as an opportunity to continue the traditional friendship, deepen strategic alignment, and expand mutually beneficial cooperation. Premier Lee had visited Malaysia in June and met with Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim. Both leaders supported the ongoing efforts on visa exemption to promote friendly relations. China agreed to extend the facility until the end of 2025, while Malaysia extended the visa exemption until the end of 2026. China has remained Malaysia's largest trading partner for 15 consecutive years, since 2009, with a total trade of more than 450 billion yuan, around $98 billion.
That was Chen Ziyuan reporting. Finally, in Africa, the Rapid Support Forces in Sudan have announced it will deploy troops to protect civilians in areas under their control. The announcement came after a UN fact-finding mission to the country proposed the deployment of UN forces to safeguard civilians. The conflict in Sudan has killed tens of thousands of people since it began in April last year, mostly civilians. Experts in Sudan are casting doubt on the initiative by the RSF. Najma Abdirizak has more.
For months, civilians across Sudan have borne the brunt of a deadly conflict. A recent UN report accused both warring parties of widespread patterns of violations. Among them were indiscriminate and direct attacks on civilians, schools, hospitals and other vital facilities. In response to an increasing international outcry, the RSF chief said a special force will be formed to protect civilians and combat security breaches.
These forces have been formed from the civil administration, law administration, civil and military police, intelligence and the main forces. The largest body, which is the Civilian Protection Force, is made up of Rapid Support Forces groups. These forces have several tasks, including protecting the lives of civilians, protecting their property, persons and homes, and also contributing to resolving conflicts that arise between citizens.
But Sudanese experts question the RSF's ability to control its forces, which has gained control over more territory in recent months.
I believe that the Rapid Support Forces is not qualified to form any bodies to protect civilians because experience has proven that it is one that commits crimes against citizens and that all the areas that are under its control now have their citizens migrating in search of security and stability in areas that do not have the Rapid Support Forces.
I believe that these forces, even if they are deployed in all areas controlled by the Rapid Support Forces, will not bring anything new, but rather violations will continue because those who commit these crimes are elements affiliated with the Rapid Support Forces, and they are highly armed elements with full battle armament.
In June, the International Criminal Court Chief Prosecutor Karim Khan announced he was seeking evidence of alleged war crimes committed in the Darfur region. The outcome of that investigation is still unknown as war-weary Sudanese civilians continue searching for any respite from the conflict.
That was Najma Abdirizak on the conflict in Sudan. Now recapping the headlines. The leader of Hezbollah has vowed a retribution for the deadly communication device explosions which killed dozens and caused panic across Lebanon. China and the European Union say they've engaged in a constructive consultation regarding the bloc's ongoing anti-subsidy investigation into Chinese electric vehicles. And Malaysian King Sultan Ibrahim is in China for a state visit. to mark 50 years of diplomatic ties between the two countries. And that's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to the Beijing Hour, a one-hour podcast news magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Qi Zhi. Thank you for listening.